talking about an album by Liz Weiss called There's a Light. It came out, well, it actually originally came out in 2012 through something called the Deeper Well Collective. And then she re-released it in 2015, I believe, as her debut album. And I heard of it first in 2017, I want to say. I actually discovered Liz Weiss because she was featured on a John Mark McMillan album. I think it was Mercury and Lightning. It was on one of the songs, and I loved her vocals on that song. And so I checked out some of her music on Spotify and was like, wow, this is really good. And I enjoyed it at the time, but I didn't really dive into it. It was more like check a couple songs out. And it was about 6 months later, I think spring of 2018, when I actually went back to the album and listened to the whole thing. And that was during a season of really high anxiety for me in my life, honestly. Like just generalized anxiety, weird stuff where for no reason at all, you're just sitting playing guitar or reading a book or doing nothing. And you start having shortness of breath or your stomach drops out or you shake a little bit, just weird generalized anxiety symptoms like that. And I found this album to be really, really healing and nourishing for me, especially the first two songs. Those are the ones that at that time, they were just in my head over and over and over again. Abide and the second song, Empty Me Out, for the main ideas that are presented right there. In Abide, the chorus, she says, you and us, the hope of glory, and you we will abide, is how she finishes out the chorus. And in Empty Me Out, the song begins with, empty me out, fill me with you. And the idea of, I don't know what's going on in my life, but I want to be with Christ. He's my hope. I want to abide in him. I want to be emptied out of whatever anxiousness I have and filled up with Christ. It was just good for me to meditate on those things. And it didn't fix everything, but it was helpful for me. So that was a couple years ago. Now, I guess 2.5 years later, almost, I just remembered listening to Liz Weiss and was like, I want to check out some more of her music again. And I went back to that album and listened to the whole thing through a little bit more, and I have been loving it. And so I wanted to share it with you guys. Also, today we have a new special guest with us. It's me and Jay, like normal, but we also have Caroline here. So, Caroline, if you want to introduce yourself really quickly, go for it.
So I'm also on the Borderlands team with Jay and Matthew, and a single gal here, and happy to be on the podcast with you guys, and really enjoying the music so far. So, yeah.
Sweet. Thanks for being with us today. So back to Liz Weiss, a little bit of background on her. Like I said, 2012 is when she originally put the album out. 2015 is when it came out as her debut album, more officially on a different record. But I think she's fantastic. I think musically, she's very talented. Lyrically, I love this album. Actually, interesting, a guy named Josh White wrote a lot of the lyrics on this album, and he was, I think, the lead singer for Telecast in like the mid-2000s or something like that, and then he has gone off and done his own thing under his own name and collaborated with a lot of people. He's really involved with the Deeper Well Collective, which is a big collaborative group. But through some of those collaborations, Liz Weiss has been able to get really connected. And so at this point, even though she has had her first album in 2015, I think her second album came out in 2018, she's been featured on albums by The Porter's Gate, Ghost Ship, John Mark McMillan, Micah Bourne, Propaganda, Russ Mower, and she's toured and shared the stage with people like Lecrae, Sandra McCracken, the Blind Boys of Alabama, Lake Street Dive, The Temptations, and more. So many different people and artists and genres, and she's just on the up and up. I think she's fantastic, and I can't wait to see where she's going to continue to go, because she is pretty relatively new as far as the music scene goes. But yeah, I really enjoyed listening to the album again, and I hope you guys did. So I'm curious, what were some of your first impressions as y'all listened to Liz Weiss?
All right, let's get into it. Like, I'm just going to tell you, like, this album, I hear what you're saying, like, about kind of the anxiety. I've never really maybe had experience with that, but I think over the last few months of this quarantine, there's definitely been a lot of pressure, and I'm just exhausted. But this album was exactly what I needed after 4 months of quarantine. Like, it just absolutely hit the spot. Like, I think that I had a lot of really good impressions. I think that initially, this album is perfection. Like, I mean, there's not a single stinker on the whole album. Like, all the songs are like magnificent. I was a little confused because as I'm reading through the Genius like lyrics or whatever, I'm like, who is this White Josh guy? Evidently they flipped the names, and I'm like, who's White Josh? You know, but I guess now I've learned he's Josh White. But the combination of the songwriting and the amazing vocals was just perfection. I mean, this kind of album happens very, very, very rarely, and it just hit on every single level. As far as her like vocals, like I could not come to compare her to another vocalist that I know. My first thought was Lauren Daigle, but it's not the same. It's very different. I thought about Lauryn Hill. It's very different. Like I thought of a lot of the blues folks, like, Etta James and others, but none of them really fit. She is in a class of her own. Like, I was like, okay, there's not a compartment for Liz Weiss. She just has a really interesting and different sound. The music, I loved it. It was simple. It was soulful, and it added the accents at just the right moments to accentuate the lyrics and the vocals. Like, I mean, the production was on point. Like, they knew exactly when to raise the levels, when to drop the levels, and all those kind of things really worked together. Lyrically, this is kind of how I put it. Imagine if the Apostle Paul was a soul singer. Like, that's how I felt. I mean, I feel like there was such richness in the words that she spoke or that she sang. And once again, I think it's that collaboration between the songwriter and her, that there was such richness that I really felt like this is part of my heart's cry. Like, I agree with this from my very soul. And I'm not speaking as a heretic here or anything. Like, she's not, canonized, anything like that. But I got the same feeling, like that same kind of camaraderie. Like, I agree with this. Like, my spirit agrees with what's being said deep down. And I feel like, once again, that's like a really, really rare thing. Liz Weiss is an infinitely gifted singer. I was blown away, and I was not expecting it to go as well as it did. Like, it's very rare that I find an album where I don't dislike one song, because I'm really picky. But I loved every song on this album. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
So I'm just to give you a heads up. The low points, when we discuss low points, it's going to be really short on my side. I got nothing.
Cool. Well, I absolutely loved this album. I love the sound of it, and her voice was really fantastic. I'm also a lyrics person, and so I will enjoy music that has a good sound to it, but unless the lyrics are really deep, it's not something that I'm going to come back to and, really listen to over and over. So I really loved all of the lyrics on this one. I have a hard time listening to any albums in order, so I picked a random song out of the middle to start with. But
Don't do that.
So I listened to Pure Religion first, and I have no regrets. It's my favorite on the album, and I was really glad that I listened to it first, because it just really, I think, set the tone for all of the lyrical content and the sound. Oh my goodness. So, but yeah, I really loved it, and I immediately shared it with my family. I was like, this is a beautiful, rich black voice, and she's got so many deep lyrics. It sounds like she's singing Augustine and Julian of Norwich, and like these really deep, the creeds and all of that is on there. So I really, really loved it. And I loved the connection to like sorrow song structure in a lot of the things. There's like some folk song influence, especially in Pure Religion, and some other things like that just were really up my alley. I didn't have any objections really to the album as a whole. I loved her sound and all of it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great album. I mean, I didn't want to jump to the next album yet. I was tempted, but I'm like, we need to have this conversation before I move on, because I was afraid that I was going to mix up things I heard in the next album with my conversation here. But, we're traveling in a couple of days. We're traveling down country to the capital. And I've already been telling Susan about the album. I let her hear a little bit of it. And so I'm looking forward to, I love listening to music on road trips. Like, that's the best for me. Like, you hear different things whenever you're driving, in my opinion. And so I'm looking forward to checking it out on the road trip with the whole family. Another interesting thing is that I loved it so much. And like, I try, Victory, she loves music. And I've been trying to get her to fall in love with good music instead of, the not so great music maybe that she has access to. And so, I've filled her little iPod with all kinds of good music that I want her to listen to. And like Victory she loves Aretha Franklin. And so I was like, okay, I want you to listen to this. I'm going to put it on your phone, and I want you to listen to it. I want you to check it out. So she was really excited. I haven't heard feedback from her. Maybe we'll have her as a special guest someday. But yeah, I mean, it was good enough that I didn't just share it with my wife, but I shared it with my kids, which I did also with King's Kaleidoscope. But this one, I was like, before I finished the first listen, I had already put it on Victory's phone. So anyway, yeah, those were my first impressions. This is a great album.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, I'm glad you guys like it because I love it, and I think she's fantastic, and more people need to listen to her because
Agreed.
she's so talented. But let's dive into the high points then. Can you narrow down to a few, Jay, or are you going to talk about every song on the album?
I've got I think I've got maybe 5. Some of them are short, but I do have quite a bit. I want to see, let's see, which one was my favorite? I'm just going to go through them in chronological order because I feel like that's the way an album should be listened to. But Abide was amazing. I loved it, and it was a really great start to the album if you started that way. But lyrically, there was one line that just stuck out to me. Jesus, we will throw away our lives to follow you. Gosh. And it hit me. And once again, I don't have music hit me that often, like that hard. But like that really just captured, I think, my initial call to go to the field. Because I think there's a lot of things that I wanted to do or things that I could have done. And a lot of people maybe took it from the perspective that I was throwing away my life, that, hey, you're not going to get paid much, you're not going to get to do much with your life if you go and do that. But I think in my heart I was willing to do that, and I wanted to do it because of the richness of who he was. And the name of the song, Abide, really fits that. It was part of abiding, basically willing to throw all the other things away, all my other hopes and dreams away, so that I could latch on to who he was and actually get my nourishment from him, my identity from him, instead of all the other things the world wants me to get identity from. I felt like that the lyrics of that song, they were sound, they were encouraging. And what I love most about that song, it ends with action. And once again, I think it's a great missionary song. It's the last little bit said, help us to make you known. And so you guys know me and the music that I listen to. It's always about, hey, not just how you feel, but like, what do you do about it? And I feel like that she ended with that. There was also like this real Motown sound to it that just really drew me in because, boy, between Stax and Motown, like I'll listen to that stuff all day long. And it had but it wasn't Motown. It just had this different feel to it. And maybe we should just hit both. Like, how many songs did you have? Was Abide on one of your high points?
Yeah,
What were your thoughts?
I started starring all of the songs that I really loved and starred almost all of them. So, yeah, I loved Abide as well, and I also wrote down that line as one that really
It's so good,
hit me
man.
hard. Yeah, and I loved like that spiritual gospel feel, especially in that song, the way that it handled suffering and abiding, and like opposed those two, but also found the harmony in them. I really, really liked it in that song.
My next one was the next song. Surprising. But Empty Me Out, like my first thing that I wrote down in my notes was all caps, SOUL. Like that is soul music, the way that it was supposed to be. I felt like the message was really compelling. It was very biblical. It was really sound. Like it encouraged me. And other thing I wrote in my notes was I've got to see Liz Weiss live. Like that is going to be now on my bucket list. I will do it next time we're in the States. I'll find her and listen to her because I absolutely loved it. But in this song, I wrote down that I feel like she is singing exactly what I feel. And I feel like that's really rare with music. Like you can, whenever you're listening to something and you feel like, I get that, I understand that, but there's something else whenever you feel like she's singing my words. She's singing my feelings, my heart's desire, and in a way that actually also expresses my emotion about those topics. Yeah. It's not just the words match, but the emotion behind it, the soulfulness, like soul music comes from deep, deep down. And so I think that's part of what really captured me. I will tell you, like, I've never, like that song specifically, I've never heard anything like it. And this is what I wrote. This is how soul music was meant to be. Why? I mean, there's some great soul singers in throughout the history of music, but singing about carnal love is usually what soul singers sing about. Heartbreak, all those different things. And I think those are really heartfelt. But there's nothing that goes deeper than agape love. Yeah. And so it's almost like as she was singing, she took soul to a whole nother level of depth because of the topic. And it was like nobody else can really express anything any deeper than this. You know, of all the great soul singers in history, like, I mean, Aretha's, my favorite stuff from Aretha is her gospel stuff, and it's for the same reason. It's because it comes from a level deeper than normal soul music. And so I absolutely love that song, and I would probably listen to that over and over again. It's great. Did you think anything about that song?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This was, I mean, the second one on the album, and so I was already ready to put the album on repeat at that point when this one came on. I love the backup singers, and like you were saying, you know, that soul sound to it. And she uses so many, like, recycled lyrics or just in the same tone of hymns, and, like, the Apostles' Creed is in this one in pieces, and I just read Andrew Murray's book Humility, and there's a lot of themes that is in this song too. And so, yeah, I loved the lyrics in this one were so deep, and the fact that you could sing it, you know, with your soul. I was already singing along to this one, you know, on the first listen, so it was really good.
I don't know if we'll be able to do this on the podcast, but at least on the video, I think it'd be really good to listen to a clip of this song at this point, because I think that it would kind of give people maybe a glimpse. But because it's such an amazing song. I'm going to jump to the next one because we got extra time because I got no low points. So the next one I wrote was Pure Religion, which is your favorite song, right?
Ooh, yes.
Go ahead. You start with this one.
I love this one because of that the old time religion song. It had a similar pattern and rhythm, and you know, I love folk songs, and you know, not folk the genre, but you know, older folk songs, and be that sorrow songs or whatever. This one reminded me so much of Poor Wayfaring Stranger, which is one of my favorites, and just the cyclical nature of the song and the call and response and the repetition. It was, you know, I think that was one of the reasons it was my favorite. I was for sure singing along with this one and harmonizing by the end. And it was just this deep, like, it took a lot of the sorrow songs, a lot of the folk songs that we sing, but it modernized it. It put it into our culture so that it was something we could sing and feel some of those same things. And so I really, really appreciated this one.
And I think it also brought a whole nother level. Like, what I wrote in my notes here was hope in all things. Like, in the end, like, that was the ultimate message, is that, yeah, these things, I think this song was really just about death. It was about dying, and, you know, I've always loved like listening to songs that might be played at your funeral type thing. But I really love that because in this song, that was what I took away from it was in the end, like it's hope in all things, like even in death, even in suffering. I'm going to tell you, like this song, I wrote here, like, this is church house music. Like, this is what you hear whenever you're really going to church and feeling it. And, it's very similar. I think the languages are different, but whenever we're working here with the Sudanese, whenever they're really getting into a song, it's the same type of emotion, the same type of feel that's coming out of the music, and you can sense it on their faces and the way that they respond to the music. But in this one, I was listening, I really was enjoying the first little bit, but there was a moment where this song completely changed for me. Like, it's singing along, and it's got some instrumental, and there was this moment where the bass dropped on this thing. It was like, boom! I about jumped out of my easy chair. It was, I got chills. I was like, yes, yes. I mean, it just, the music all fit. It fit the words, it fit the timing, everything was just kind of spot on. And so I dug the song. I wouldn't say it was my favorite, but it was just simple and raw. And there wasn't a ton of production. It was just like, this is what it means to be a Christian. This is how we live. This is how we believe. This is how we walk. And so I really appreciated it. All right, my next one, All Must Be Well.
Yes.
This one might be my favorite. I really dug this song. I love the fact that it was dealing with how do we maintain a proper focus in the midst of suffering and hardship. And once again, like we've talked about this over a few weeks, like Christian music doesn't discuss that very often anymore.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciated the willingness to be able to address those topics and address it in such a biblical way. Lyrically, I would say this was, maybe not musically, but lyrically, this was my favorite. The message was powerful. And once again, I feel like that the message in this song was H-O-P-E. It was hope. And I do feel like that was the sense I got for the whole album. But this specific song really screamed hope to me. And I loved it.
Yeah, this was also one of my favorites. I love the theology of suffering and the way that she dealt with that. It reminded me a ton of Julian of Norwich, who was 1300s anchoress in England, and she lived through the Black Plague. And a lot of these are, her words, all must be well, all will be well. And she talks a lot. She was a mystic, so she has some kind of woo stuff, but she does talk a lot about her relationship with Christ and the hope that comes from that and the love that she knows, in her relationship with the Lord. And there's one line in there about his strong hand is stretched forth to shield us, that again is an idea. I don't know if it was written intentionally from Julian's stuff or not, but that's an idea that she talks about, of knowing, like, I'm so small and fragile in this world, and it's so big, and it's only the love of the Lord that sustains me in it. And it's just a really comforting and truthful, statement. And I loved that was the spirit behind this song, and that it applies to us so well as we're going through our own plague. So, yeah, I love this one.
I feel like, too, that throughout the album, and specifically in this song and others, like, she portrays a very good and clear image of who God is. And I feel like that she also portrays a good, whether it's her or White Josh, they portray a good and clear image of who we are.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that is so essential. Like, they maintained a balance. And as we've talked about in past episodes, like, oftentimes with worship music, that balance gets off. And they may be speaking about something as true, but they're also leaving out something that's equally true. But I feel like within this album, there was a real good maintenance between the truth of who we are and the truth of who God is, without overemphasizing one or the other. And so I think that song really demonstrated that too. I've got one last one. And then if you got something else, you can throw it out there. But it's There Is Light, the last album the last song on the album. I didn't write a whole bunch of notes, but it took me back whenever I was in college. I've spoken before about being a part of this unity group and trying to engage with people from different cultures on a spiritual level. And I was invited to go to an African-American church in the town of Abilene, Texas. And I really hadn't connected with any of the churches that I was a part of in college at that point yet. They were all too big and not really, I just didn't feel it, it was too kind of production based. And so I went to this local African-American church, and it was probably 60 people, which I like small churches, so that worked for me. But this song, took me back to those experiences. Just these the lyrics were just very rich and gritty, but it just took me back to that experience and to worshiping with people who you have something in common with, even though you have many things that are different. But like, let's focus on this thing that we know to be true, that we can both grasp a hold of and find unity in the idea that there is hope and his name is Jesus. And so like, this was a very nostalgic song for me. It took me back to a really cool experience that was very fundamental in my development as a young adult. So I loved that song.
Yeah, I also like that one. I starred the second version of it on the album, the acoustic version, because I loved just hearing her raw voice in that. And the lyrics were amazing, but like hearing her voice. And I also enjoy music that I can also learn and sing and, you know, play on the piano or whatever. And the acoustic version was totally that. Like, it's something that you could pick up and, you know, play and sing to on your own. And so I really loved that as well.
I've got a thought. Just a thought I'm going to throw out there. This might get cut from the podcast, but maybe we'll put it on the video. But like, I wonder if Liz Weiss is interested in going on a mission trip.
Ooh.
Coming and doing a concert in Uganda. I'm just saying. I mean, I know a great place that would love to have her. But no, in all seriousness, I do think of these songs. And working with refugees, gosh, how much this would bless them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know, this music is made for refugees, like who really struggle to hang on to hope. And, you know, you guys know the heroes that we know out there in the refugee settlements. And like, I think if these songs resonated so deeply with us, even more so with our friends out there in the camps. And I'm just saying, I mean, we need to look into it. Liz Weiss, if you're listening, I'll send you my email. We can make this happen. Matthew, what you got, man?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, Abide and Empty Me Out, those first two songs, I mean, back in college, they hit me really hard. And even now, nothing's changed. I just love them more. And so, yeah, I think that I was really focusing, honestly, on those two songs and playing them on repeat mostly. And I listen to the full album sometimes. But going back through the full album now, Pure Religion, 100% was one that I kept going back to, and it's
that
short.
Bass drop, man.
Oh yeah, I know. Every time it got me, but it's so short. It's like 2 minutes, and I both love and hate that because I want it to be longer because I want more of the song, but I love it because it leaves you wanting more, you know. And so that, I don't know, I feel like that can be a mark of a good song, and so that was really cool. Overall, I just had a fun experience listening to it again and kind of prepping to talk to you guys about it, and honestly just wanting to hear your thoughts because I'm glad that y'all like it because I do love it so much. And so I think one of the other ones that really hit me this time was actually Entrance. I think it's the third song on the album. I loved her vocals on the bridge. I think what are the words? It's like, Jesus, take my hand, lead us into the promised land, and she sings that over and over and over again, and I just loved hearing her vocals on that part. It's raw and gritty, and it has that sort of the effect on most of the album that they've put over her voice or overlaid is sort of not like tin canny, but it's like an older recording sound, and so I liked that musically as a whole. But when I listen to this album, I can't shake the first time I listened to it, and just kind of the experience in life of anxiety that I was going through, and I know we haven't hit low points yet. I don't know if you guys have low points you want to talk about in general, but one thing that I think is really fascinating about Liz Weiss in general, and this is coming straight off of her website bio. It says that at the age of 19, Weiss's health declined, and she found herself on hemodialysis for the next 3 years. Her illness left many scars on her body, including those from surgery on a fistula. And then in December 2005, in December 2005, she received a kidney transplant, and that marked the beginning of a time of great healing and perspective for her. And so I'm thinking, I read that, and I didn't know that about her, but I'm thinking, like, you're 19 years old, and that's a time of crazy change already, getting out of high school, going into college, questioning everything in the world because you're leaving home, whatever. And she's experiencing this really deep, heavy pain and sickness in her life. And the Lord was faithful to see her through it. and she was able to be healed, which is a huge, wonderful story of joy and blessing. It says about a year after all that, she joined a local church and started singing solos. And I think her bio says the rest is history. But
Amen.
But, I'm thinking about that, and it's so encouraging to me to know that little bit of her story, that even after years of suffering and confusion and pain and wondering, like, what's going to go on with this, what's going to happen, her first album is one of hope, exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's something all of us need to hear, all of us can hear, all of us want to hear, whether we realize it or not. And it gives me hope to see how she has been faithful to the Lord and worshiping him and following him and loving him, and how he has been faithful to her to provide for her, and to been faithful to us to provide wonderful worship music for us to listen to and worship along with. But that was just a fact that I really found interesting.
I
thought
think
I would share.
also it would have been really easy for her to write and sing a compelling album about her suffering based on that story. But like, she didn't choose to do that. Like, she chose to write an album, to sing an album and work with good old white Josh, to produce an album about Jesus. Like, and I love the fact his name is spoken over and over and over again. And it's just like, it's so uplifting. And I think it says something to their character, that they see the answer is there. The answer is in Christ, not in our own personal ability to overcome difficult circumstances and hardships, which is so easy for us to focus on. Yeah, I overcame this, or I did this, but I love the focus that she had in this album.
Yeah, that was for sure one of my high points of the album too, was just this balance that she keeps and the tension of, she's talking about suffering in almost all of these songs, but it's very solid roots theology. And, Enclosed by You is another great one that I love. And it is, it's just this, it's very good at expressing the doubt that we face in suffering and that vulnerability, but then also still expressing joy in the Lord, like a lament song. And I really loved that about that song specifically.
Yeah, Enclosed by You has the Augustine line, "How can I contain you if you contain everything? The house of my soul is far too small, but still I must sing," she says. And that gets me every time. I absolutely love that. And because you're right, she's juxtaposing these questions she has about really big theological questions of, okay, Lord, if you are transcendent and greater than everything else, yet you're also immanent and came in the flesh and you walked this earth and you understand my struggles. How does that work? And it's this beautiful mystery. And she says, but still I will sing. But still I must sing, really, And I love that song. So I'm glad you brought that one up. But she balances suffering and hope throughout the album. And she doesn't cut corners. She's not minimizing suffering. She's not minimizing things that are tough, which I know I am, and I think many of us are prone to do often. Just kind of cast something aside, minimize it, and not really deal with it, not truly give it up over to the Lord and trust the Lord in the midst of it. But she does that in her lyrics here. And it's an encouragement to me.
Yeah, it's good. Well, regarding low points, did you have any?
The only thing that I didn't like is what you were saying about the distortion that they put on her voice to give it that older sound. I just loved her raw voice. So like the acoustic version of There's a Light, I loved that. And that was the only thing I was slightly irritated by, but that's
my lowest point of the whole album was at the very end when it was over. And I was like, this is it? Like, we're done? No, I love the album. I didn't have any low points at all. I loved the whole thing. There was nothing. I think, like I said, it's high praise for me because I'm very critical of music. But I think that this is the perfect album. I think it's the perfect album. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. And maybe it's because of my preferences. I really like this style of music. I love female vocalists, and everything just came together for me. So maybe I should say, for me, it's the perfect album. But I think that if the people who are listening, if they listen to it, I bet you they might agree with me.
Yeah, I think people have a hard time finding something wrong with this album, just being honest. Unless, like you said, it's too short. You want more, I wish Pure Religion was longer, but I still love the song.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Yeah, I don't really have low points. myself either. But is there anything else that caught you guys lyrically, just kind of randomly?
That's all I got. I think we could talk about the cultural relevance today, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, I do feel like it's very, I mean, granted, this wasn't written very long ago. You said it was 2012?
Yeah, I think that's when
The first time it came out.
Yeah, it was like a soft release or something. I'm not sure.
And then the next one came out when?
2015.
15.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about that long ago, but I do feel like that this album has maintained relevance, and I think that, you read the news right now, and this is right now, when are we? July of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of grim news. Before we started recording, we were talking about some pretty heavy things that were happening in the world, just in our private conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the life that we live. We have a 24-hour news cycle right now, and like you can't get away from the ugliness that's happening in the world and people's very opinionated perspectives from each angle on those things. And so it's like you're constantly bombarded by hopelessness. I think that, as most of the world, but specifically America, is so polarized right now that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like there's no way out. Like if you take this stance, then you're this. And I'm not going to use any words to specifically focus on a topic, but if you don't take this stance and you take this stance, then you're that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing in between. But I feel like that this album really kind of cuts through all that, and it recognizes that, you know what? It's grim. The world that we live in is full of suffering and pain and hardship, yes, but there is hope, and his name is Jesus. And I feel like that culturally, once again, and y'all have heard me say this, and I'll continue to preach this, but culturally, the answer to all this grimness, the answer to all these social problems and racial problems and political problems, we keep trying to find other solutions, but there's the original solution, which is there for all of us. But we have to latch on to it and say we truly believe that Jesus is the answer, and quit chasing after a Republican Party or Democrat Party or whatever, trying to find solutions to the problems in our lives. And we have to really start digging in the Word and finding the solution in Jesus Christ. Like if we don't, then we're going to be continually upset and disappointed by what we find. But I feel like that for me, the cultural relevance here is that constant pressing of that message of hope, and not just this kind of vague idea of hope, but hope who has a name. And to me, that's probably the most culturally relevant. I may be over-speaking, because I love this album, but that's the most culturally relevant message out there today. Because we need to solve some problems within our country, within the world. There are some major issues that need to be resolved. But more than anything, people need Jesus. And if they find their hope in Christ, then these issues of the heart will no longer be as destructive. Just to share something, a friend of mine wrote a blog post a few months back, dealing with, he grew up in Alabama in a very racially homogenous area. And as some of these things have been kind of coming out in the news, and some difficulties with police brutality and other things in the States, he had to ask himself, do I have any racist issues in my heart? And he said it gave him opportunity to be able to think back and to realize that there was a point in his life where he definitely held a lot of racist beliefs. But he said that the turning point for him was whenever he came to follow Christ at a later age. Like I think he was like in his late 20s, early 30s when he came to Christ. And he realized that both ideologies could not exist within the same person. That in finding Jesus, he chased away things in my life that were displeasing to him and that were holding me back from understanding who he is and understanding freedom in him. And so I feel like that in this album, the cultural relevance to me is that deep message of hope that's found in the person of Jesus Christ that changes everything. And it gives us perspective for all of the issues, all the hardships, all of the grim perspectives that we see in our life. Like, as we as Christians read the news or watch, the news, if, you're on your phone or whatever, like, it should press us to our knees. rather than push us to this corner or that corner. Like, I'll be honest, I was convicted by some of these things. Like, do I pray about these grim things? Do I find hope in them, or do I find hopelessness sometimes? Do I get frustrated? Do I take out my frustration in my words? And so I was really kind of encouraged in that, she kind of reminded me of some things that I feel like are very culturally relevant today. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of the same things that you said. I think this is a really good theological corrective to a lot of Christian music, especially worship music, that doesn't touch sorrow, or if it does, it's really light and, it carries on. And so I loved that about it, but I think it's especially culturally relevant right now as we are dealing, in American culture here, as we work with Sudanese culture, in the timing of everything, there is a lot of sorrow in the world. And I think Black artists and Black theologians, have a lot to say about sorrow that is very real and refined because of their experience. And so I know she didn't write, most of these lyrics, but hearing her soul in them was really, really helpful to help process, I think, a lot of the messy stuff that's going on right now. So, yeah, I agree completely on that.
You got anything to add, Matthew?
I mean, just to reiterate what y'all said, so not necessarily right now. And I already shared what I read on her bio. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest point for me. And it's another example, not just sort of metaphorically or some sort of random hypothetical example, but a true, this is her life example of enduring suffering with hope in Christ that leads us to truly obey, leads us to truly have joy, leads us to truly find hope and life in the midst of darkness and despair. Mm-hmm. And so, man, I love this album. I'm thankful for Liz Weiss and
White Josh.
And White Josh. Yes, thank you, White Josh. Appreciate you. But
let me throw in a mentorship moment as we kind of look at this album, and I've kind of reflected on it and said, what can we learn? What can we teach regarding mentorship when it comes to this album? And the word that came to mind is actually the name of Barnabas. And you guys know about Barnabas, also called the son of encouragement. And if you've ever been around somebody who was just an encourager, like, to be around them is like a drink from a cool well. It's just refreshing, and it's needed, and it nourishes you deep down in your soul. And I feel like, to me, that's what this album was. It was very refreshing. It was like a drink of cool water from a cool well. I think that my question to us as mentors and apprentices is, are we being that to the people around us? Like, it's really important for us to follow Barnabas's example. Whenever you see somebody who is struggling through difficult issues, like, do you make it worse by trying to discuss the ins and outs of what you're feeling and whatever? Or are you able to be nourishment? Are you able to be that sip of cool water in the midst of the desert? And I feel like that all comes back to this being. It's not like we're forcing ourselves to do it, but as we walk in this hope, we begin to see things from a different perspective. And therefore, whenever we see someone suffering, we're able to give them hope as well. Because, this whole concept of Barnabas being a son of encouragement, that means that it's coming from inside of him. Like, it's not something that he puts on. It's not like a coat that he wears. This is coming from who Barnabas is. And as mentors and apprentices, and as we are training the next generation, as we are teaching and encouraging and counseling, like, it's really very important for us to learn to be like Barnabas, to be like Liz Weiss, to be that drink of fresh water in a time of despair. Now, there is a time to address the hard issues as well, but I think that there's also a time that we need to recognize, this is the time for me to be Barnabas. This is the time for me to refresh. And so that's kind of one of the things I took from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also, in addition to time, there's a tact, and how you communicate about those things. I've been reading Job, and I'm around chapter 20 right now. And yeah, good light reading in the midst of pandemic. But man, his friends, they're not super encouraging. It's actually really, really bothersome. And I don't want to I don't want to be that guy.
But
you
isn't
know?
it similar to the things that we're reading online and things that are, I mean, it's the same kind of stuff, the same kind of negativity, that we hear daily.
Yeah, and
But-
sometimes it's stuff that is just incorrect. Sometimes it's stuff that's factually true, but really not helpful at the moment.
Exactly.
And so the tact to know, like, I'm going to say this in this way right now, or I'm just going to keep my mouth shut because this is not helpful and this person's hurting. And the best thing I can do is just sit here in silence with them, I'm thankful that this album does something. This album, again, we've talked about it over and over again. Liz brings us hope. And so I'm very thankful for that. But you're right.
I think that the most refreshing thing that we can do, once again, is what Liz did. I'd love to go back, and I probably will go back and listen, but I doubt I'll count. But I'd love to count the number of times that she mentions Jesus by name. And to just hear that name and to be reminded of his love, reminded of his presence, even in the midst of hardship. It doesn't mean that he's going to rescue you from every difficulty that happens, but to know that he's there. And I feel like, once again, that's what Liz did in this album, is she reminded us that even in the midst of hardship, that Jesus is there, he cares, he loves us, he hasn't forgotten us. And oftentimes, especially we men, we tend to try to want to fix situations instead of saying, no, instead of trying to solve your problem, let me remind you of who Jesus is so that you can rest in that, because maybe my solution will work, but maybe it won't. And so I found a lot of power in that. So overall, man, I know that you probably want to give us some recommendations and stuff, but as I said before, I think this is an amazing album, and I want to, again, formally extend the invitation to Liz Weiss, and I'm going to add on White Josh. If White Josh would like to join and come on this mission trip, or one or the other, it doesn't matter. I want both of them to know, if they do have a chance to hear this, that we were very, very blessed to hear their hard work and their expression of their faith in this album, and we're very appreciative of it, and we will be sharing it with our friends and family because we thought it was amazing. So well done.
Yeah, so you guys clearly like Liz Weiss. If you want to listen to more of her stuff, she's got a second album. It is on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. So definitely check that out. And then it's just the two albums she has right now. I think she's been releasing some singles here and there, so hopefully she's got a third album upcoming. I'm not sure. But she's been featured on a lot of different artists, as I mentioned before. So the song she's on in the album Mercury and Lightning by John Mark McMillan, I'm trying to remember what that song is called. I think it's Body in Motion or something like that, I think. I really like her vocals on that song. And then she does some songs on, what's it called, The Porter's Gate? Is that what it is? And that's another sort of collaborative, collective effort. And it has a lot of people, anyone from Liz Weiss to, I think, Audrey Assad and Josh Garrels and different people. And there's some really pretty songs on there, and she's got a couple. So as far as I can tell, if she's on the song, I like it so far. So go listen to whatever she's put out.
Cool. Sounds great. Well, thanks to all the listeners for listening. And Caroline, thanks for joining us today. And we'll have something new for you coming up.
You're gonna need that pure religion, hallelujah. Gonna need that pure religion, hallelujah. You're gonna need that pure religion gonna carry you through. You're gonna need that pure religion, hallelujah.